The road ahead is about to get very rocky, but we knew that already, didn't we? But the author of the Gospel of Mark signals this change with a very dramatic narrative twist in chapter 8. Jesus, up to this point, has been traveling throughout the region of Galilee, preaching and teaching and healing. And all of a sudden, Jesus stops and turns to his disciples and he asks them, "Who do the people say that I am?" And the disciples report to him the rumors that are floating about. Some people say that he's Elijah. Other people say he's John the Baptist. Others are saying that he's one of the great prophets. But then Jesus says, "But who do you say that I am?" And Peter, in his usual blunt self, blurts out, "You are the Messiah." And Jesus confirms that this is true. He does not try to hide this from the disciples anymore. But he goes on to tell them that he is going to suffer and be rejected and finally be killed. And then, even as the crowd is starting to gather around, he utters a very mysterious and challenging definition of discipleship. He says, "If any want to be my followers, they must deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow me." Wow. Sounds like this discipleship thing is going to be really dangerous. So we're going to spend our session today trying to figure out exactly what it means to pick up the cross, to take up the cross, and follow Jesus. Let's start with our Greek word of the week.
The Greek word of the week is stauros, which literally refers to a stake that was used in Roman times to execute political outlaws and insurrectionists. The word in our Bibles is typically translated as cross, which of course has powerful connotations for us. But what might have been Jesus' original intent in using that term with his disciples? We sometimes talk about having a cross to bear, by which we mean that there is an inconvenience or a burden or something in our life that we're just obligated to carry. It's just my cross to bear, we say. But is that what Jesus really meant? Jesus and his audience would have been very familiar with the sight of criminals fixed to stakes alongside of roads and out on the distant hillsides. It was Rome's message to anyone who would be considering resistance. And Rome dealt very swiftly and decisively and in lethal retribution against anyone who cultivated those fantasies. An act of resistance would have been met very quickly by Rome. When Jesus called his disciples to take up your cross and follow me, he wasn't talking about shouldering an inconvenience or bearing a burden. Jesus was saying, in effect, if you're going to follow me and this way of the gospel, you need to be ready to die.
John Wesley here with a word of encouragement for you. Rejoice and be exceedingly glad when men persecute you for Jesus' sake. When they persecute you by reviling you and by saying all manner of evil against you falsely, they must blacken you to excuse themselves. For so they persecuted the prophets who were before you, those who were most eminently holy of heart and life. Yes, and all the righteous which have ever been from the beginning of the world. Rejoice, because by this mark also you know unto whom you belong. And because great is your reward in heaven, the reward purchased by the blood of the covenant, and freely bestowed in proportion to your sufferings, as well as to your holiness of heart and life. Be exceedingly glad, knowing that these light afflictions, which are but for a moment, work out for you a far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory.
Rejoice when people make fun of me?
Yes, they did it to Jesus. They will do it to you too, as long as you're carrying that cross.
You know, I think what Jesus was saying is that discipleship is dangerous, no matter how you define it. We are called to walk right into the middle of the world full of sin and evil and shine light into that darkness. And so it's dangerous. We don't quite know what is going to happen to us. I recently came across a new and intriguing interpretation of this strange verse in the Gospel of Mark. The Greek word translated cross in that verse is the word stauros, as John pointed out. But it can mean not only cross and not only wooden stake, but it can also mean tent peg. So perhaps what Jesus was saying to his disciples was, if any want to become my disciple, they must pick up their tent peg and follow me. So perhaps what Jesus was really saying was, we need to uproot ourselves and be willing to leave our home and go off into the unknown. This way of discipleship is a road, it's a journey of faith. And Jesus perhaps is just simply saying we have to trust God to lead us where we need to go. Now, this is no less full of danger, because once we pick up our tent pegs and bring our family along, we don't know where God's going to take us. Same thing happened to Abraham in the book of Genesis. God called Abraham to leave the land of his fathers, take his whole family, and go to the place that he showed him. And Abraham did that, even though he did not know when he set off where he would end up. This next story involves all these elements of discipleship. The idea of picking up, of relocating, of setting down new roots, and of facing danger.
I became a true disciple of Jesus Christ 10 years ago when I felt called to come to the United States. In Pakistan, we had really good jobs, which we were among a few blessed Christians. That I was working at Pepsi-Cola and Farouk was working with the Canadian immigration. And at that point, we had everything that you can imagine for a good life. But that was a point when I felt, let's leave everything behind and go where Jesus wants us to go. And it was a really hard decision, because Farouk did not agree with what I wanted to do, what God was calling us, but in the end it happens what God wants us to do. And so we left Pakistan in 2000 and came here as missionaries. We were commissioned as missionaries in Atlanta, and then I worked with Oak Cliff United Methodist Church, and the whole purpose of taking this journey was to go back and do something for the Christians in Pakistan. And so in 2002, we went back and started a mission project for Christian children in Pakistan. It was similar to Project Transformation. And so we tried to teach little kids, teach them Bible, because as a child I grew up with not knowing what's going on, and all the sermons were based for adults. And so to me, children's Bible was something really new and fascinating. So I took that back to Pakistan to all the children, and now it just makes me feel so happy to see them knowing all those stories that now my boys here at First Rowlett are growing up with, and they know the same stories. They can even relate to those. And so it's a journey. It's just being a disciple. A true disciple is leaving everything you have, for better or for worse, and just going wherever he wants you to go, and not thinking about what you had in the past, not thinking about the maids that I had back home, or I didn't know how to cook, but just going on, because truly what he wants is what we need to do, and that makes us happy, makes us complete. We were in Pakistan for 2 years, and in 2002 when we went back, we started the project. We went for good. Never knew God is going to bring us back, because our journey here was just for 2 years. And then God worked through the North Texas Conference, and people here at the conference wanted us to come back and start something for the Christians here. And so for me it was divided. I wanted to stay back and do something for the kids, but then again I needed resources to continue my mission project. So came back here, used to speak in different Sunday school classes, raised fund, and used to send them back at the same time, trying to get the Christians here in North Texas together to come under the Methodist umbrella. And so that continued for over 5 years, and since then we applied for our immigration, stayed here, became citizens now, and but unfortunately 2 years ago we had to shut down our project in Pakistan because of this scary situation. But I do hope and pray that one day it's going to reopen and we can continue blessing the lives of kids over there, not only the kids but everybody, and touch their lives. So.
I'm not going to candy coat it for you. You've got to count the cost before you decide to become a disciple. Jesus even said, a general reviews his army before he sets out to fight. And a building contractor makes sure he has enough supplies before he starts a project. So you also must decide if you're ready and willing to finish what you started. Well, are you ready to finish what you start? Are you ready to set out on this road, no matter what the danger, no matter what the cost? I hope so. See you on the way.